VRChat, the next frontier. These are the experiences from Gunters Universe. His continuing mission? To seek out and connect with VR devs and passionate enthusiasts. To discuss theories, beliefs, and rhetoric of all kind. And to boldly go where no show has ever gone before.
Welcome back, everyone, to Gunters Universe. How are you all doing? There's so many people here. Woo! Yeah, great to see so many cool people. So many people that I know, so many new people that I haven't met. Welcome to Gunters Universe. You're going to have some fun tonight. Tonight is a special night. With us is visual effects legend John Gaeta. John is best known for enabling landmark cinematic innovations within the Matrix trilogy, where he explored and advanced methods known as bullet time, virtual cinematography, and universal capture. John Gaeta is currently the executive creative director at ILMxLAB. And the XLab is a VR AR lab that Industrial Light and Magic started up about a year ago. XLab is involved in creating immersive entertainment, including real-time cinema, virtual reality, mixed reality, theme parks, new and experimental media. Let's give it up for John Gaeta, everyone. Yeah.
Woohoo! Howdy.
We're so glad to have you. How you doing?
Well read, Gunter.
Thank you. Yes, I have my notes up, virtual notes. Yeah, dude, it's really great to have you. Thank you so much. Ron Millar is here as well. You're at his house. He's good friends to you. He thought, it'd be great to have you on the show, and I was like, absolutely, this would be great. So Ron Millar, who is VRChat's chief design guy, how's it going, Ron? Ron is speaking R2-D2 today. We don't have an interpreter in the house. Hopefully C-3PO can be summoned, and maybe we'll... We also have with us Cause and Effects. He's my co-host. How's it going?
Fantastic.
Great. And K-Dog, well, he's that green floating camera over there. He's recording the show. So we can all say hi to K-Dog.
Hey, everyone.
All right, so let's get into the interview. Scrolling down. Okay, John, tell me a bit about yourself, your background in technology, and then I'll ask you about when did you get in VR and stumble across that.
Okay. I don't, where do I start? I grew up in New York. I lived there for quite some time. My first real sort of experience with technology per se was going to film school at NYU. So I went through that entire experience, and with the backdrop of New York City really being the ultimate location to sort of come in contact with new thinking in media of any sort. So I wouldn't describe myself as a technologist in any sense. I'm interested in creative innovation, and I think a lot of that had to do with my exposure to art at the same time as being interested in new media.
Cool. And you've been in the film industry. You've also worked in the game industry as well. It's really interesting that, of course, you're well known for being involved with the Matrix. I love how there's that intersection between VR and the Matrix, of course, virtual reality, the simulation. Is that kind of when VR kind of started to click in your mind, when you started working with the Wachowski's brothers and on the Matrix?
Well, in a certain sense, yes, but one thing that started to occur to me was, at the time that I was getting involved in visual effects, I was really fascinated by the idea of coupling something virtual to something real. And that's just a basic fundamental visual effects, objectives. And at this point, for years and years, I wanted to try to understand how I could essentially plan a moment, plan a scene in visualization, in computer-generated visualization, and actually be able to use that to build, a moment that's never been seen before. Now, these days, 2016, that is taken for granted that, many, many people are masters of that. But it took quite some time, I think, for people to kind of get a sense of the complexity of the real world and how difficult it actually is to seep something into it. But if you could understand that, then you had some essential knowledge. Integration, whether it's light, it's measurement, it's understanding the dynamics of a space. So anyway, for a long time I was preoccupied with that subject before I met the Wachowskis. And I, even as early as, like 1992, dating myself, no, 1994, I was interested in trying to capture things universally, as in, like being able to sort of photograph, if you will, whether it's in virtual or in reality, things from every angle for the later purpose of redirecting.
So that's really cool. You really started this fairly early on. And one second on the screen here. Let's move to appropriate screen. That's pretty cool. So also including your background is a lot more film, I would say, is most of your career, right? Like with movies like Speed Racer, What Dreams May Come. What is it like being being a creative director or being part of the visual department of these big movies? What's your favorite part about this?
Well, if you are being asked to help define the logic of a universe that one has not seen before, that's the greatest possible job you could ever have, right?
Right.
It was lucky for me to meet the Wachowskis insofar as, at that time we were the same age. We had very similar interest in music and other sorts of arts, and just literally just like kind of a friend's connection that was outside of film entirely allowed us to develop a comfort level with one another, whereas they would allow me to hang with them, in living rooms, just relaxing and discussing what the sublime nature of virtual reality may be someday, for example. And it's something I know for a fact everybody here does probably with great regularity, right? That we're at this point where we've moved well beyond those days where we like dreaming about it, where we're creating conceptual images that sort of were, what we hoped or thought it might be someday. But what was great about going through the Matrix, though, was that, really quite a multi-year prolonged discussion about what it might feel like, and what was so fascinating was that it wasn't about the technology per se. It was about how emotional it could be at some point, and how convincing, and at what point that there was flawless belief in the simulation as reality. And so that was a very interesting time just to have that kind of intellectual catalyst for me, and then I was also quite lucky insofar as the Wachowskis really didn't care how we went about making imagery for them. You know, like we could choose any method. And so we decided we would attempt to use methods that we thought might someday actually be used in the making of virtual reality.
Right. Wow.
So bullet time, the first one was like a hack, right? So it was like a concept of of having a, you know, the one thing we know about virtual reality is you essentially have a God's eye. It's limitless, right? You can be anywhere. You can be omnipresent, which is the most favorite topic of oh shit, I'm spacing out. At any rate, so you know, so we're in this pursuit of a God's eye, and so every kind of capture method that we could think of was in this hope that we could sort of see it as at will. So anyway, but bullet time was the first bullet time was a total hack. We basically, you know, use visualization.
We have the video if you want to see. It's up to you, John. Let us know, but we can put the video of bullet time up while you're talking. If you want.
Yeah, keep going. I'll cue that up. Mm-hmm.
It's up to you.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Riff out. You know, whatever video makes sense while we're talking.
I think this will sort of hopefully it's not too loud. It's the making that you sent.
Yeah, some of them have audio behind them, some of them don't.
It's not too loud, which is good.
Oh yeah, this is good. Okay.
Bullet time.
Yeah.
That was the very first thing that we started.
Oh, you could turn that sound down.
I can't.
Oh, okay.
I wish I could.
All right.
We're limited.
But we don't have to watch the whole thing. We can just.
Yeah, that's fine. I think we get it. So. Yeah.
Let me put it back. Sure.
Yeah. Example that.
Wrong video.
So anyway, I mean, we figured that out in a obviously in a visualization, and started realizing that the only way to move a camera that defies physics was to just have a lens everywhere a lens needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
So you can extrapolate that idea into like every single possible viewpoint very quickly. It wasn't practical to do then, although I did a bunch of experiments back then using robotic camera systems. I was lucky enough to be at a facility that had the world's largest overhead robotic camera system, and it was everything was was hung on this sort of tracking system, and it had a telescoping column that came down with a camera. So there was never any crane or anything on the ground, right? It could shoot in any direction but not see itself, and it was huge. It was like basically 100 by 50 feet, right? So I had this warehouse-scaled robotic camera system that I could use to do spherical captures and all sorts of special captures. So before bullet time, you know, we sort of were playing around with that, and we realized we could do something like that. And that just sort of began the thinking that there were probably many methods of reality capture that you could try to start ingesting the real world, you know, for the hope that at some point you could use it in a virtual world.
Yeah, I find that pretty fascinating that you guys were implementing methods that you thought were going to be used in virtual reality. That, yeah, we'd be able to see from any perspective, and that's what we're doing here. Positional tracking, basically my camera in this virtual world gets to move in all this space, and then eventually we, you know, love to hear more about like light fields and when we're going to actually see this realistic space that we can move the God's eye camera around. I love that term, God's eye.
Well, David Hockney was the guy I was thinking about. He was obsessed with that topic because he thought that a monocular view, a single point of view, was like a form of prison, right? That, you know, the controller of that view was basically taking away your freedom to see things from any perspective you wanted. And all of his paintings are like about this subject. And he would do these he'd do these fantastic shows where, you know, he would look at a subject from like multiple views. It was quite fascinating, and he thought that if you could create art like that, it would make you essentially closer to God, because it would be godlike.
Sure.
At any rate, and in later Matrix films, we started to think that, you know, we wanted to move beyond the hack that was the bullet time stuff and into more of a holistic universal capture. So we started creating these arrays of high-def cameras, the first high-def cameras ever built. We had like every single one ever made in the first universal capture test. In fact, we borrowed 3 of them from George Lucas at the time. And then the other kind of cool thing is that, like in the backgrounds of some of those shots, they were created using these techniques, which I'm not sure if this is really the term that people are using lately, but, you know, image-based rendering, basically. So it's essentially capturing real-world objects and places from all different perspectives and extrapolate the form and reproject, but then using very powerful algorithms to sort of like make any view, you know, any view super clean. And those techniques were began by a fellow named Paul DeBevic, who some people may know here, but he was sort of the head of graphics at the ICT facility in you know, Southern California, and has been demonstrating some examples of light field renders that are beyond most things I've ever seen, captures of the real world. So he is, I think, going over to Google now. At any rate, there is this long thread line, and it goes even well before any of the stuff that we were doing, you know, of folks who have been like on this subject, as you know. But it's not, I'm not just only obsessed with reality capture, it's just that was one of the Matrix sort of preoccupations.
Oh, that's really cool. A few other things that I saw in your background, and then we'll move on to more of what you're currently working on with XLab. I saw some of the movies, Speed Racer, and I learned about photo anime and Poptimistic. Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
What's that? That's really cool.
Well, Poptimistic is an Pop Optimistic, which is what the entire theme, the skin of the film is, and we wanted it to some degree be like the antithesis of Sin City. We wanted, it was a movie that was made Sin City was made like a year and a half, 2 years before or so, with an exquisite, you know, approach to sort of like color noir, you know, black and white, really, really remarkable film, and it was all done over green screen. And so I loved the depth that they went to sort of create a graphic novel on film. I thought that was a landmark film for that reason. But, you know, at the time we were kind of obsessing on anime still, and so we wanted to try to figure out how you could translate an anime into cinema. And so the Wachowskis, like, you know, when they were kids, they grew up on Speed Racer. It was one of their first inspirations. So they're like, we want to do that. And so that was really actually, I mean, like, some people love the film, some people hate the film, but that was one of the most fun experiences I've ever had designing, just insofar as it was truly free from the sort of requirements to create real things, right? It was essentially a pursuit of how do you kind of create expressive composition and design that was more about, you know, the way it made you feel as opposed to what was real. And so we studied a lot of films of Miyazaki, for example, and tried to emulate. So what we decided we wanted to do for that was we wanted to emulate the sort of feel of a classic Acme down shooter that they might have, you know, used when making anime, where it was, you know, cell by cell, layer by layer, and then there would be this really like very interesting sort of you know, offset motion, you know, design, you know, that many animes have, right? In the older ones, pre-3D ones. And we're like, so we wanted that quality, that sort of multi-planar, sort of expressive, extra, you know, sort of, you know, emotional stuff. So, but at the same time, we also wanted to sort of construct a lot of backdrops, because we were going to essentially do a pop color version of a Sin City type of production model. So our choice was at the time to go all around the world. We had this theory and it worked, right? We were like, okay, many fantastic places in the world are inaccessible to film crews because they're either too hard to get to, too expensive to get to, or the crew would like to destroy the location because it was just, you know, too unruly. So many locations are off limits to films, and there are places all around the world that are like spectacular. You would just love to shoot a scene there. You just can't. So what we wanted to do was, so we basically developed this crew called the World Unit, and they literally trotted around the world, and they would shoot HDR spherical photographs, of these remarkable places. But even more so than that, what we were doing at the time was shooting many spheres in a particular location in a way that we thought that from an editorial point of view, we could get whole scenes out of cutting around. So right now I'm moving my head. We could cut around to these different bubbles, basically, and construct any backdrop from any angle out of these clusters of bubbles, right? The spherical. But then we would also take these bubbles and we would basically not just use them flat, like a lot of 360 videos, but we basically segmented all these different depth layers and relayered them into different depths that we thought would look cool if we actually moved the camera against them. And then we would add 3D, and we added all these effects and all this stuff. So it was like a way to take 360 video, basically, or 360 images, and really like make them much more, unique and sort of, closer to what, at the end result is it looked a bit like moving those cameras against those cells of anime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a beautiful film. I haven't seen it since it came out. I'm definitely going to be rewatching it now, especially after hearing you talk about it. It's super interesting. What about What Dreams May Come? I love these movies and that you're a part of them. They capture that what is real thing. In my life, I've always been questioning what is real. The Matrix was sort of a pinnacle film for that. Just that moment where he goes down the rabbit hole. So what Dreams May Come like?
That was another experience, with reality capture. So the basic premise of that film was that Robin Williams basically has to literally travel to his wife who dies in the beginning of the movie. He has to sort of make his way to her version of heaven. So she's a painter, and so the whole idea was to, take a landscape and basically convert it over to, expressive oil paintings and all sorts of things like that. And what the director wanted to do was to shoot in Glacier National Park, which has got these like spectacular high peaks, really like high mountain peaks. And the particular area that we shot was only accessible literally in July. Like there's snow mostly everywhere most of the time, and you can't get to these locations. But in July, everything is melted off, and they have this explosive wildflower type of moment where all of the hills everywhere, as far as you can see, are like these, multicolored wildflowers and all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so he wanted to use that as the real world underpinning for something, right? And they're like, what can you do? So, again, these are the same friends that helped me do the original bullet time test. The same 4 weeks that we worked on bullet time, we worked on this core test for What Dreams May Come. And for that, we basically got one of the very first LiDAR scanners ever built, right? It was the size of a refrigerator. And it was the first, it was built basically for the Navy, right? So the Navy could basically scan a damage on a battleship, and they'd be able to coordinate how to repair it. So we literally got this like Navy-made LiDAR scanner, and we took it up to Glacier National Park. And what we had to do was to scan whole mountainsides and like really unique locations and create like a massive cloud point cloud, and try to use that to get a sense of the form of these places so that we could eventually transform it all into oil paint, the backdrop. And one cool story I could tell you is that, like, because it was one of the first LiDAR scanners, it was a red laser, and which meant that in order for it to really pick up, its recording, we had to do it at night. And so we had to be in the high peaks of Glacier National Park from roughly sundown to sunup every single night. And it was like, in Glacier National Park is where the largest numbers of grizzly-related deaths occur a year.
Oh, really?
And like that particular summer, 3 people had been attacked, right?
Oh,
and one person died in the area that we had to go. So for us, so my job was to oversee this like all French laser radar crew, and in addition, to help us, I had one Mountie, not a Mountie, but a park ranger, who was an always armed park ranger, and the Indian chief of Glacier National Park, right? Like, so like the largest peak was named after his grandfather. So basically, we had to like go out at like 3 o'clock in the morning and laser scan the sides of these cliffs with wildflowers, while the Indian chief would tell us stories, about insane things he had seen over his life. And the park ranger and the French crew were so that was kind of like, okay, reality capture, right? and then lastly, the real method actually was a pioneering effort into this area of optical flow as well. So what the research crew had to do was figure out with the first general shape of the mountainsides, and then examining parallax in all tracking shots, determine as well the location of everything upon which, pixel by pixel, they would hang oil paint.
R2D2, you like that? Are you into oil paintings? If you haven't seen the movie, you must. It's just so rich, so beautiful. All right, moving things along, let's dive into the XLab. What I have here is a little description of ILMxLAB. It's the pioneering spirit that inspired storytellers and technical artists to improvise, innovate, and imagine a galaxy far, far away. It's built into the DNA of the XLab, a new laboratory for immersive entertainment, and it combines talents of Lucasfilm, ILM, and Skywalker Sound. They're reinventing the way stories are told, experienced, they're connecting artists with their audiences like never before. How did you get involved with ILM?
Well, well, I've had friends there my whole career, firstly, and like many people who outside have always sort of been amazed by the fact that ILM is able, with some regularity, reinvent the future of cinema. And so I've been following them. But when I actually on Speed Racer, I decided I would take that chance, and I wanted to, work with them during that. So they actually did one of our scenes. And so I was a client at that time. But I got to know them even more. And, in the long arc, of having friends, right? Like, I think many people know that the real size of a particular, type of frontier chasing, graphics artist for some reason, or engineer, it's not that large, right? And the amount of people, and so you can trace the same folks sort of like working their way through various plateaus of visual effects, through AAA gaming, for example, and into these labs of the big tech codes that surround us. I'm here in San Francisco. You can follow friends and colleagues, and I'm sure we all have them, right, that are in these places. At any rate, so, a career and a life is like one big loop of kind of crisscrossing over these folks that you met in prior times. They've evolved, they change, they go somewhere, you just end up in the same places. So as it would turn out, one of my great friends from the Matrix days, his name is Kim Library, he eventually ended up as the chief strategy officer for Lucasfilm. And that was there was a number of years back, just before the transition of Lucasfilm to Disney. He basically suggested that there would be a great era of filmmaking about to happen, and so I thought that would be a good time to come over. But the two of us have been interested in this immersive photography, and basically stepping inside, simulation in a sense, all these years. So I'm like, okay, let's see where that will go. And so I joined Lucasfilm a few years back, and ILM. Basically, I was afforded the ability to participate in various areas of the company. The three main areas really, was the stuff that Kim was doing, which was advanced real-time graphics. They basically had begun to put together a group of folks who were really pushing the limits of rendering, essentially, and high fidelity graphics, to the extent that they have the capacity to create photorealism in real time over there. And that was a project that was beginning. I was very interested in that for various reasons. But also I was interested in immersive media. Just prior to getting into Lucasfilm, I had worked for several years with Ron over here, actually, on some another form of lab work that had to do with gesture-based interfaces.
And Hack Spanner over there in the audience.
Oh, and yes, and Hack Spanner.
Hack Spanner! Guys,
So
can you play the slides?
Which slides? Oh.
For Squishbot, is that what we're talking about?
No. Oh, one of two things. Sorry, John, I didn't interrupt you. I was going to say, whenever you're ready, we have the XLab kind of sizzle reel. If you people may not know what that is, and so we may want to just play that to people understand the context of what XLab is, whenever you're ready. And then I was going to say, between the shots, can we play the slides?
Absolutely. It's been a little challenging because the videos restart. But yeah, the sizzle reel is really nice. Yeah, it gives you a nice overview of XLab. XLab, you guys have your hands in all kinds of things, all kinds of immersive entertainment, and not just VR, not just AR, but all kinds of things. And we have various videos to kind of go through some of this, but I mean,
the sizzle reel, I think, is good.
Yeah,
so how is like the structure set up there? Is like, do you just do everything project based, or like the people from like Skywalker Sound, ILM, and Lucasfilm just all kind of come together and play and see what comes up with experimentation?
Well, it's got several serious missions and some more free rapid prototyping missions, and then the participants of XLab are the advanced development group I just mentioned, which is a separate real-time group. It is also a good number of people from various factions of ILM research and development. So there's a lot of advanced virtual production research going on. Essentially, ways of using virtual real-time renders as you are in the act of creating and compositing and things like that. But also Skywalker Sound. There's a number of people who are both designers and innovation people from Skywalker Sound that they also as well work with this. And then lastly is the story group itself from Lucasfilm, the same people who develop all of the story arcs for Star Wars, who work with all of the writers of the major features and the directors and such, right? So they are direct participants in XLab. So this lab has a very rounded and very balanced creative and technical capability. I would also mention that, in the same floor, we also have all the conceptual design work, painting work that goes on, sort of kind of trying to understand what the universe and what moments look like in Star Wars and other films. We have both the sort of elite Star Wars concept department and the ILM art department, both fantastic. All of this stuff on in the same sort of two-floor proximity to one another, all these different things. So as you can imagine, it's a pretty great atmosphere, like on any given day, just, walking down the hall and the kind of cool social that you might have. One day you could talk to someone who is an absolute, masterful painter, and the next day you're talking to someone who is sort of like, crafted one of the greatest looking real-time images you ever saw, like in the same hallways walking around. So what XLab, though, endeavors to do is to try to explore how story might exist in new immersive formats. And, part of that is an exploration of form. It's trying to understand, well, what forms are these, is this sort of story media going to take? Because we have to be able to, prototype inside that from the get-go. So there's a lot of interest in the form. I keep getting a little ding, 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 ding. Does everyone hear the ding?
Out over here. Might be on the local
My
computer.
Okay, don't worry about it. So what's really quite interesting is what we realized we could do was at a certain point we hit a point where we could almost render at a photographic quality scenes like cinema. right? But in engine, in heavily modified engines, and using different techniques, sort of part borrowed from ILM and from elsewhere. And once we realized that, we were like, oh, it's been only a decade where we've wanted to step inside these worlds, right? So we'd see these fantastic worlds in cinema, so evocative in the types of moments happening. They were like, well, we really want to go inside that, right? We want to be free inside of that. And so we figured there's a path, to essentially constructing that which we're currently putting on the screen in a fashion that would enable us to sort of like basically go through that portal, right? Go right in, look at some of that story content as if it was like a living sculpture, right? So you're like in the expository surrounds of those moments. But in truth, once you've entered the destination, you're in it, right? You're at the destination.
Right.
And if it's if we were to make believe that Star Wars is real, right, we would be in these places. And so that sort of implies persistent world and all sorts of things. So our thought was, we want to create a form of immersive cinema. Is the front door, and it doesn't always have to go through this front door, but we're interested in this idea of entering through this front door that's a portal inside of our dramatic, storytelling. And then just basically go in there, being there with friends, explore, have our own memories in there, You can draw a line from passive cinema through to completely free interaction now.
Right, yeah.
Right? And it's not really available to anybody yet, but it's just becoming possible now in a way that isn't, a conceit that, okay, this kind of looks like a video game, so I'm just never going to believe the reality part. I can't be fully immersed because I'm aware of its fakeness, But
right.
We're approaching a time where we will, I can't say it's this year. I say within 5 years we're approaching a time where we can get close to flawless realism.
Yeah.
So anyway, we think that really is quite interesting that the form could change like that. And of course, really once you're inside the destination, you're going to want to do things that are very, very different than watching a movie, right? At that point, you're there, and essentially stories happen all around you. Stories flow through you. But, there's a lot of people very preoccupied with this idea that you got to tell a story to the VR. It's very easy to walk out on a city street and look in all directions and basically say, that story, right? All the things happening around you, that story. So rather than put all the pressure upon everything being curated and laser focused onto you, just being there is a form of story immersion. And then there's no reason why there cannot be coexistence with wanting to be free and interact with others and make your own story. You can do that too. So we're here doing that right now. It'd almost be as if all of a sudden, a story scene broke through this place, right? And then suddenly we were caught up in that, and maybe it would flow through and we'd still be here. So there's no reason why that couldn't be rather easy, easy feeling, right? Not this really like, massive complexity that people seem to think that it is.
Right, the experiences teleport to another destination and be involved in the story. And I heard you say something about, like, if VR doesn't get social, it's not going to get picked up very soon. So
For sure.
making these things social.
Yeah. I completely agree. I mean, I think that this is what VR will become, right? Like, it has to be social. And this is the only thing that I think everyone here knows it because they've done it, right? But, like, every other use of VR, someone pulls the headset off in 5 to 10 minutes. They're like, okay, good, I'm done, right?
Right.
This is the only thing where time almost is, you can't understand where time is because it's so engaging and it's so primitive, right now. I mean, compared to where we'll be in 5 or 10 years. So it's pretty obvious that, so if that's the case, essentially, I mean, what's great about, other platforms that have come before is they've already shown us quite a lot about what we could do. I mean, we want to stand inside of remarkable places and bear witness, right, to things that we could never imagine, and that be unpredictable. So that's what we will be there. We'll all be doing this there in a number of years.
I just want to call out the time and say that, do you want to talk a little bit about the Magic Leap stuff, and after that maybe some Q&A?
Yeah, Magic Leap is what's up next.
Okay.
Let's show.
Speaking of
such
time
big
dilation.
Yes, I have no idea how long we've been here. Maybe it's been 2 days. Maybe it's been an hour.
Exactly.
I get lost.
Like,
I spend so much time
I didn't
here.
have this beard when I started.
We're in a sweat lodge right now.
Are you guys sweating it up?
Yeah, I'm dripping. I'm in my underwear.
Okay, so recently released that you guys at the XLab at ILM are partnering with Magic Leap. Magic Leap has been very mysterious, but it's something that we've talked here on the show many times. We're very interested in AR, and Magic Leap has some of the most interesting, stuff that they're working on. They seem to be working on what might be the best sort of AR, at least that's from what we're hearing. And there was a great Star Wars Magic Leap video released this week, so let's take a quick look at that, and I'd love to get your thoughts afterwards.
I regret to report that due to unforeseen circumstances, we have not yet reached the desired arrangement with Jabba the Hutt regarding Captain Solo's death.
Wow.
An army of stormtroopers is searching for us. It can only be a matter of time before we are blasted into spare parts. I told you it was dangerous here. We have not yet completed the mission. How did we get into this mess? I really don't know how.
That's so cool. Okay.
A little
So,
degraded, that video.
what was that?
It's a little degraded, that video.
Yeah, and in here it degrades even more. But I'm probably a lot of us here and in the audience that I have has probably seen the video. Tell us a bit about Magic Leap, how you guys got connected with them, and gosh, I don't think you could tell me enough. What's going on with Magic Leap?
Yeah, well, I have been wondering about that forum for a while as well, and again, the small circles. At this point, some of these communities are rather small, and if you even go back 3 or 4 years, there really isn't a lot of people right in this conversation about emergent platforms and such. And I sort of had heard about some degree of mixed reality research happening in a very the person who told me was someone I trusted quite a bit. And I had I've seen a lot of really cool things at some labs. I've seen some really fantastic stuff that Microsoft was working on worked on some of that sort of stuff, saw things in some other labs besides theirs. And so I've been really curious about, mixed reality for a while, even though, the time when I was not doing film. After Speed Racer, I stopped doing film, down to this super miniaturized sort of like form factor. And, you could take some of these sensors and you could basically do room capture and you could do skeletal capture. And so, immediately you're like, oh, look at that. I can stick things onto objects and on tables and all of that stuff. I can track people. I can hang things off of people, sleeve them with computer-generated images. And most things that folks were testing, were the entire frame, of course, was a virtual world and a character that you were sort of moving around with Kinect or Project Natal stuff. But in truth, it could be mixed reality just as easily. And so I worked quite a bit on these sort of proof of concepts, sort of putting content into living rooms for years before even I got to Lucasfilm. And I was, basically, it sort of really lit a light bulb up in my thinking about where that really we were about to move into an era where it was plausible for the everyday person to essentially capture their world and even their bodies, right? That this seemed like around the corner. And, I, from that point forward, really was watching to see if anybody was starting to do new things with augmented reality or mixed reality. So I always keep my ears open. And anyway, a friend had told me something was going on in Florida, so I reached out to Rony Abovitz, just cold call-ish, and he responded. And he responded because he is a true avid fan of science fiction. He absorbs all different types of media. It's a real appreciator of sort of how, the art and science of creating fantasy. So in addition to all of his deep, low-level understanding of the technologies that he's creating, he's really just a straight-up fan, right, of story and things like this. So, right, he knows he knows a lot about who made some of the seminal works in cinema or games, right, and other media. And so to me, it was easy to talk to him, right, very, very easy to talk to him. He could hang here with anybody, and it would be very comfortable and casual to talk to him on a full gamut from super tech to experience itself, right? And so, he spends a lot of time just reaching out and talking to people about that subject, right? The future of experience. And I do think that his background also in robotics and virtual surgery type stuff obviously got him thinking quite a bit before it came to him how he might approach something that seemed essential to people, which was the ability to essentially, gaze upon virtual objects, and even more so than that. So anyway, I started a dialogue with him, very simple, through social media, and, just exchanging ideas, and realized how great a fan of Star Wars he was. And, it started very simply. And then as well met Graham Devine, who's over there, who's a very famous game designer, who is working with Rony to conceive of interactive experiences of all sorts. They also hang with Neil Stephenson, who's the writer of Snow Crash. So it's quite a posse of interesting. So cool. Yeah, it's a posse of far-out thinking, but no slacking in the technology department. Absolutely remarkable teams working on some pretty advanced optics and vision stuff right now.
Whoa. I can see that. I think that's the Q&A death skull.
Very diabolical.
Yeah, it's a great time to kind of dive into Q&A. People can start thinking up some of their questions. Maybe Mr. Q could delight us with a little more special effects while people queue up their questions in their own mind. I don't know if he's
Go for it.
summable.
Maybe
assume
put
he
on some
hears me.
thinking music for a second. Put on some thinking trance.
Oh, yes, of course we need that.
All right.
Not easy in the vibe, but we're doing it. Oh, don't go too far. No.
Andromulus presents.
Here, click, go. Okay. So this is some fun stuff that we can do with VRChat. So this is a little more interactive.
So I have a couple questions. At the XLabs, do you primarily just work on the Star Wars universe, or do you use any of the other you work in any other franchise stuff, like maybe like Pixar, Toy Story, and that sort of thing?
Without being too specific, we are working on other universes besides Star Wars. But, Star Wars provides us the full loop, right? The full ability to conceive, paint, write, make, and release. But, yes, there are some other projects that we have going on.
So are you working on any of the stuff that's going into Star Wars land at XLabs, or is that primarily just the Imagineers?
I think it's been expressed in the press that we are working with the Imagineers actually on some material for Star Wars Land. Yeah.
Nice job, Mr. Q.
I really like this effect.
Yeah, who else has a question? I think the music isn't too loud. Keep it going for a little bit.
I kind of have a statement and question.
Sure, Mekla.
Before the question, I'd just like to say that my first weekend in VR was the weekend you came in to do your little talk on virtual reality in Converge, actually.
Yeah.
That was my first experience in VR. I'm curious, in this past year, since it's been, I think, almost exactly a year since that talk, how have your impressions of VR changed in the past 12 months, if at all?
Well, I think that what's happened in the last year is that a whole bunch of us have actually spent a whole lot of time in VR, for real, right? As opposed to those cursory, at times, to sort of try demos and stuff. So, Ron, can you turn it down just a tiny bit?
Yeah, we can use that.
Gunter, why don't you just turn it off? I think that was supposed to be the question thinking music, not the entire.
Yeah, I got confused easily how it all transitions, but it's all fun, so.
No problem.
Sparkles.
Effects off.
Yeah, so I don't know. My impressions of VR in the last year have well, I appreciate when people do sort of understand presence to the degree where they're trying to make the experience as clean and intuitive as they possibly can. You see a lot of different examples where you can get confused by what's happening, and that's because we're all learning how to design for some kind of a perceptual experience, right? And so I think that there's over time been a better appreciation for how to position things before people. So that's one thing. The other thing was that I have, come to understand that there can be sort of an overlap of different form types that could potentially be successful. So social plus gaming, social plus story, those things can go together. They don't have to be exclusive. So I've seen little experiments here and there seem to show that that can work. So not sure. I think the fact that we're able to do this every day is just absolutely remarkable. That, like, I feel like I've gone the full circle of trying to imagine it to the beginning of actually seeing some of this stuff. And it really is about your perception. And so that really, it's going to require a whole different type of thinking about how to actually stage moments for people.
Yeah, good answer. There's only one other question. I don't know if you'll be able to. Another. No, it was a good answer.
I was tap dancing a little bit because I was befuddled in the middle of my answer. I felt like I was drifting.
Most people seem to see me tap dancing. I don't know if you guys can.
Yeah, you're fidgeting. You're fidgeting.
The only other question I have, I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer, but it's always entertaining to ask anyway. Oculus or Vive?
Oh man,
He did it. He went there.
I think there's value in what everybody's doing. I do, and they basically they're all they've all achieved just amazing things in this last year that I never thought I would see. And of course, they have different philosophies in their V.1 of interface, and I definitely could see the thinking behind the different approaches. There's like value across the board, and not only those two. So I look at all of this stuff as it's just a point in time along a timeline. I think that a lot of this stuff is going to converge in a way, right? As I think we tell the people who are really the audience, I suppose, of VR, is going to start dictating, some sort of like convergence, right? As we learn what people really want, how they want to interface. So I think inevitably, a lot of these platforms, the hardware side of things, the input devices, they start moving towards a kind of a similar place. And if you want to get really long range about it, I think that you will see at some point VR and MR converge in a particular way, in which, hopefully sometime in the future, you have one very simple ergonomic method of dialing anything from 0, pure reality, through any proportion of mixed reality into complete virtual reality. So all this current V1 gen hardware, I think it's just a moment in time, and I don't know. It's hard to pick anything over anything else.
Do you think this VR phase will last, I don't know, as long as VHS did? Or how quickly do you think something like this would be phased out?
You mean VR, you mean this current gen of equipment? The current gen, or you mean VR in general?
Well, you just brought up a really interesting point with mixing both 100% virtual reality and augmented reality and complete reality in a single headset. Sort of, in essence, being able to turn the blinders on the back end of the VR headset for different levels of experience.
Well,
that opens up.
I mean, doesn't it seem like we're kind of focusing on the years ahead that we can think about practically because we have to make things for it, but in truth, I think no one could deny that at some point in the future, we're going to be wearing very, very ergonomic, wireless somethings that can do the entire gamut of reality, the entire gamut.
Good point, R2D2. So,
I mean, the ultimate God's eye. I mean, I think of VR as like a ultimate philosopher's stone. You know, it makes it's all malleable here. We can turn anything into anything else. And then when that expands into the AR realm, it's just like, whoa.
Yeah, so, you know, AR and MR, like people are starting to distinguish between those two things, with AR kind of becoming, you know, more like the sort of infographic, more like informational data and all this, whereas MR, I think, is more commonly used to be placing sort of like objects and things in your proximity.
Okay.
But in general, I think there's incredible things coming with mixed reality. I think that it's just going to be, you know, VR is kind of like going to be for the person who really appreciates the sort of full immersion. It's like the person who goes out and buys the Bose headphones, right, and wants the full. And MR is going to be, or AR and MR is going to be just like this whole spectrum, I think, of simple things like just world UI, all the way towards sort of using the real world as a backdrop. You know, one reason why we really like the idea of MR at XLab is because it's a very short leap to think about what we're already doing. Like ILM is like the state-of-the-art in visual effects. They can do just about anything you can imagine. And there are other companies that are fantastic as well. But, you know, that whole understanding of how to hang fantasy on type, you know, you go out and photograph a city, and then in visual effects they go and they just completely transform the city by overlaying all of this content. Well, that's going to just take place over the real world at some point. At some point you're going to get like ILM fidelity, mixed reality over the real world.
I have a question, actually, for Q&A.
Yeah, Ron.
John. How do you see the theme park stuff working into this? Because there's a lot of really cool stuff, like the Disneyland announcement of a Star Wars world, and, you know, not everybody can afford thousands of dollars for VR and AR. And do you see how do you see theme parks maybe working into, or, you know, arcades, and like there also talks about the resurgence of arcades, kind of like VR arcades and AR arcades, where you can go, like, for example, Gunter went to the Void, which is a, you know, they wear a sub-pack and they hang out in these warehouses and they do all this really cool virtual reality or potentially augmented reality awesomeness.
Yeah, I've been to the Void. I mean, it's absolutely going to happen. And I if you think about like the evolution of, well, you know, so you go back 130, 40 years and you've got like magicians on stages. And so that's the rage. And then they all have to try to top one another. And so they kind of get into this sort of beyond magic, like speaking to the dead, like paranormal magic, right? Summoning, which turned into this essentially race amongst magicians to start creating more interesting illusions. And so it kind of began, you know, so a use of like magic lanterns and projection to try to like create the illusions of ghosts in the room. And so equipment that, technology that was created for that at some point started to evolve its way towards moving pictures. So the guy I love to talk about, this fellow Edward Muybridge, who did the sequential photography of a galloping horse, right? I don't know if you've seen that. So
I know what you're talking about.
in that day, this was pre-Thomas Edison, and the technique that Muybridge is using, in which he's using an array of cameras that are basically like sync triggered to photograph a moving subject. You can use the same source material as those pre-motion picture technology to do, volumetric capture, right? To create to everything in that you could use to create a volumetric version of that galloping horse. So you go from that, and then Edison rips that idea off, makes the motion picture camera. You have the entire history of cinema, the entire computer graphics, enter the picture, all that, video games, blah, blah, blah. So this is all like just a big extension of all of that. It's like one big fluid sort of progression. And the next thing really is going to be about reality capture really on the most serious level. And then simulation,
What do you mean reality capture on the most serious level?
Well, what I mean is basically the ability to sense the world, the real world, and basically create a virtual counterpart to it.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
And you were talking about the sort of out-of-home entertainment, theme parks. Also know that
yeah.
We have a
So
video. I don't know if we want to play that.
It's a simple video.
Yeah,
Well,
people get kind of a taste of what's trying to be built there, but yeah, I'll play that while. I hope there's no audio. There might be. Trying to be can't audio you to hear.
Well, today I'm thrilled to announce the next.
We'll just look at the first kind of. I like the art. That kind of shows the vision like this. Or there's a better example.
Creating a jaw-dropping new world that represents our largest single-themed land expansion ever.
Now, Bob shared
That
our
right there.
ambition
That's
to create
just
a new 14-acre immersive environment
fantastic.
that will introduce you to a Star Wars planet you've never seen before.
Yeah, it's going to be remarkable. I mean, let's think about it. When I was a kid, I remember seeing Walt Disney. I remember on Sunday nights talk to you through the television on
Wonderful World of Disney.
Yeah, and it was like when you're a certain age, when you're young. I mean, that was a hypnotic thing. He had a way of talking to you, and his entire philosophy on immersion is like foundational to many of the things that we're talking about right now. He really kind of understood that he wanted people to step inside his stories, right? He wanted people to be able to get to literally physically be inside the fantasies that they were seeing and the stories that were being depicted, to the extent that he created Disneyland. And there's so much art and science to what Imagineering was sort of like was born out of Walt Disney's like a think tank, an incubator for immersion, and they've continued ever since then. And so whether it's high tech or not, they really try to understand the flow of the social experience in addition to how they're placing people inside of these immersive, entertainment pieces. So, Walt Disney, he knew, he saw it in his head, he manifested it physically with Disneyland. So now, if you think about what the potential is given where we're at, right? This new generation of the potential of, well, again, the entire science of making physical things has advanced, right? The entire science of things like haptics and all the FX and the haptics and the sensory stuff has advanced quite a bit. So, I definitely anticipate by the time Star Wars Land lights up that will be quite, that will be quite
yeah, I had a hiccup.
yeah, that'll be quite an evolution. What the potential is that even beyond the future of the state-of-the-art of a future land that you can walk inside and be inside and have sensory experiences and haptic experiences, it seems an absolute natural fit, right? That we would want to couple a virtual fantasy on top of that physical fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
That seems like a natural. And I would go as far as to say that the combination of those two superpowers, the superpower that the Imagineers have to create that kind of like haptic, I can feel it sensory experience, along with really powerful virtual experiences in some layer cake, will be beyond anything that we'll ever get in our homes. It'll just it'll be transcendent. And I'm not sure exactly when anything that we'll ever get that, but that's inevitable, I think, in the future.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of what these theme parks are able to offer now, is something that we can never experience anywhere else. And yeah, I agree that.
I mean, just imagine the super compute power that you could put in the park. Just imagine,
right.
like the absolute state of the art.
And you guys on your iPad on the Star Wars app, like it's all being driven by the cloud, being pushed down to the iPad, and that's how you're able to be at any point. You can put your camera at any point in the scenes or inside the Stormtrooper first person. So I could only imagine, a supercomputer at Disney Star Wars Land that's feeding all the AR and other experiences to people's headsets or whatever kind of form factor. That's super awesome. Hey, Ron,
did you get bored? You got bored? Bored of your R2?
I wanted to be tall. This is the fun of VRChat. So the one thing I want also, and unless other people have other questions, I also wanted to open the floor. But if you can answer in brief, I guess. I personally think social is so much fun. Like more fun almost than multiplayer games or just more fun than like mobile and sort of anything. Like I've spent hours just engaging with other people. I just want to get your take on what you think social VR and VRChat is like.
Well, I think I was talking about it a little bit before, but I think pure social is probably the most addictive form of any media, right? Just look at our lives outside of it, right? So yeah, I think that the question is, though, what kind of social do we want? Like right now, we're like sitting around, which is fine. It's nice to see everybody sitting, but we want to interact, right? I mean,
and we want to build stories together. Like we want to.
We want to be in a world.
We're showing our dreams. We're showing our stories. We're collaborating.
I think we are. This is a seated show, which is good. But if people want to stick around, we are going to do exploration right after.
Oh yeah. Always after Gunters Universe, we go check out some of the content that people have made here in VRChat.
So, do other people have questions? People for John?
Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah, I got one about 3D scanning and stuff. I thought that was really interesting about we'll start with Kelly and then we'll move to Klaus. Yeah, what's up, Kelly?
Sounds good.
Yeah, I was just curious about the 3D scanning and how volumetric capture has changed from where you had a refrigerator-sized laser scanner, and now what are y'all using to scan with?
A lot of the it's a combination. I'm not going to be able to appropriately list these technologies that ILM uses. So there's an array. There's an array of sensors and laser-based systems. There's a lot of vision-based stuff that is done. So there's a lot of photogrammetric techniques that they use. But they have a lot of methods.
Yeah, I'd love to hear just more of that at any time, just your experience going through, 30 years ago to now, right?
Well, weirdly, like I said, I'm not an engineer at all, right? I'm a designer. I like creating moments, and so I'm really on the creative side. I like writing, and but I really enjoy hanging out and having sort of I like people who are really like deep thinkers in the sort of low-level science of things, and like it's a good combination to try to, paint a picture for folks to try to rally around, right? Before you can, it just works every time. Where if you are really like antiseptic about it and clinical about it, like we're going to do this form of capture to determine blah blah blah. And it, but if you basically, paint a picture of what the moments are that you're going to have in that place, I find that it changes the course of the innovation itself. As people say, oh, well, it's relevant because I need to do this. So my relationship, I'm not really appropriately equipped to discuss real engineering matters with you. I'm equipped to sort of say, yeah, we want to essentially create this type of construct creatively for this creative reason, for these experience reasons, and then they decide really. They decide what there's a lot of different approaches that they try, and there's really a whole bunch of new ones that haven't even been, they've not even come out yet, that we're going to move into a new era.
Yeah, I've got a prototype printing off now on the printer, 3D scanner.
I love it.
Claw, did you have a question?
Yeah, I got a question. Was ILMxLAB heavily focused on VR/AR prior to the current gen of stuff coming out? In 2012 when Palmer Luckey announced the Oculus Rift, or was it a case of that started happening and somebody said, "Oh, this is going to be a big thing. Let's start putting people on it"?
You threw me for a second, Claw, your deep voice. Well, I mean, there's two ways you can look at it. There's literally like almost at this point decades, almost of thinking about real-time virtual worlds for creating story moments that ILM has been doing. They created real-time virtual production tools for like the film AI, for example. But they've been doing it a really long time. What's different is the sort of explosion of, I go back to the same thing I said before. I feel like there was an explosion of new thinking when the sort of the paradigm of how you can interface with virtual content changed with the beginning of sensors, right? Like ditching controllers and thinking about taking technology that was previously used for like motion capture and making it something that you could actually put into your house and your home. I think that was a paradigm shift that started a lot of people thinking about augmented reality. And it was like between 2008 and now, there has been much investigation. And so, yeah, before Oculus, before Magic Leap, but they happened because all of this other stuff happened just prior to them. It was the conversation amongst a lot of folks in different labs.
I guess what I mean is, I'm not sure if I quite, explain that in the right way, but I mean, because right now, XLabs is specifically targeting, VR/MR. And I mean, before 2012, prior to that, were they specifically targeting that for things they wanted to do? And then 2012 hit, and then they're like, wow, what a great coincidence, this stuff is starting to come out. Or did it start to come out, and so then you started targeting it? Does that make sense?
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. The answer is we were thinking about it as individuals pre the formation of the entity. A lot of people thinking about it for, I'd say, the last 10 years. So going into, because the nature of our research in real time, this is not the same as LucasArts creating games. This is us now starting to think about real-time cinema, right? And even though what might have begun as a thought about creating sort of illusion of a cinematic scene, it quickly evolved into, let's go in there now. And so I would say I'd say, like, even though XLab is a year old, I would say that there was at least a few years of really serious discussion leading up to it.
John's always, just to pull John's covers for a second, he's always been a visionary. When I met him in like 2009, I think, or late 2009, we were already talking about VR, AR, very visionary things like, and Float, and was also working on immersive, sort of, I think it was like proto world, but it was immersive cinema and immersive, some of these thinkings, some of these thoughts that John has always, like, I've always seen John, and he thinks of things, and then 5 years later, they're reality. That's my experience with John.
Well, to be honest, all I do is just I add together the different conversations and interests of the people I meet, right? I just try to reconfigure things that other people are fascinated by and try to figure out if there's some kind of like convergence. Like as long ago as like the year 2000, like, so we made The Matrix in like 97 and 98, and then we had this bullet time stuff come out. And right after that movie, the Institute of Creative Technologies that USC and the military jointly launched, and they stated as one of their, they stated that the things that they sort of were starting to get stimulated by that conversation that the Matrix helped start, was something they thought that they wanted to pursue. So people get inspired. I also, like, another example would be like in the year 2000, because of that, the discussion about virtual reality, I got to meet Ken Kutaragi, who invented the PlayStation. And he had very explicit visions of working his way building block by building block from that first PS1 to the Matrix, right? Like he could see how he had worked it out, how at some point he would have enough compute power and that eventually the boxes in your home would disappear, and all sorts of things as far back as then. And even that stuff is decades after other people in the military, Evans and Sutherland, all these folks had conceived of a lot of this stuff. So you kind of take all that on board, and as you meet people, and you just try to add the things together, but nothing works better than actually having a goal, a target. So in the case of XLab, what's really fantastic, it's just an amazing experience, is the fact that, we're aware of a coming decade of Star Wars story. right? Oh,
Is this
Let me get rid of that.
I've always
And video has a mind of
I
itself.
was about to see some old flip videos there. Hey, something someone said to me once I thought was super, super cool at some party, at some VR convention, I think some after party. One person said to me, with Moore's Law, our computers were always on Moore's Law. Now reality is on Moore's Law. Like, reality has been put on that graph.
Interesting.
That because
The ability to change reality, yeah.
Yeah, like computers are always stepping up, you know, and Moore's Law is like double every 2 years or whatever, and now reality has like sort of accidentally or on purpose fallen onto that line.
So how are we going to double reality?
Because of augmented reality on top of reality, and because
Oh,
of,
yeah, good point. Good point.
those things, and because of your virtual reality, like, is sort of your reality in a weird way. Like you're in your shitty apartment, like Ready Player One, but then you're not. You're in your palace and you're playing video games on your reality. So like light fields and haptics and yeah. So it was. I actually shocked. It was actually a really cool thing that someone said to me, and I can't take credit for it. It was just
That makes total sense. I
cool.
totally understand that. I mean, what is going to happen if we get into? That's why I think mixed reality, though, in general, is going to have probably a bigger impact because it's just more of your life, right, out there. And
like
so
this
just,
is video games and nerdy and sort of, and like people out in reality are like really need to know the time and they need to see their text messages and things like that. You mean, or
I think no, I personally am not a big fan of having like advertisements and information cluttering my life. I don't like it, but I'm absolutely for adding things to my world. I would like to have a sort of virtual ecosystem out there that I can commingle with for fun, not consumerism necessarily.
I think it ties into what we're extending the human abilities into being able to do. It's sort of what technology, you know, all the way back down to language up to now cell phones, you know, our experience certainly is doubling, or the abilities that I have as an individual with the internet or now with virtual reality, it's just unreal. It's, you know, if you go back and you tell somebody 100 years ago what your life is like, they're just like, wow, that's experience doubled, tripled, or whatever.
You're totally right about that. I like the way you just put that, Gunter, because, I mean, it's messed up, but we're like literally an evolution of humans right now. We are.
It really look like it, but we totally are.
We are. Really, it's very bizarre, right? We're like working to take ourselves out of one consciousness into another. That is just mad. And it does make you wonder how that's going to change the human mind in general.
It's busting down barriers, you know, because we could teleport ourselves. Distance starts to not really matter so much. And
future technologies will be more addicting.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. More addicting.
It'll look
right,
better
like,
in here.
It'll
like look more than
from,
real.
First we started with grog and berries, and now we're at, like, you know, whatever the sci-fi drug is, right, of choice.
I think the idea of Ready Player One is a realistic notion.
I agree. I actually agree. That was like when I read that book. I mean, like when I read the first script for the first Matrix, I was like immediately taken by how absolutely natural feeling their way to describe what virtual reality was. And I think Ready Player One was the same. I couldn't put it together how that writer could understand interface that well, like that, right? That sublimely, that naturally.
Time
but
travel.
Yes.
He's already been there. He already went there. I think
it's like
the
perfect
Matrix
timing
writers
for
and
that
the other
movie
guys,
to be made.
I think they already time traveled, went there, and then came back and wrote the book, and they made them millionaires.
And it's being made into a movie now.
That's what you said. It's perfect timing for that movie to come out with all this technology hitting the market.
Yes.
So John, I can tell you a story about Gunter. Gunter actually, I don't know if he still has it, but he actually has an RV, and he sold his house or moved into his RV. And for quite a while, Gunter was actually being Gunter. He was it wasn't stacked up on a big stack, but he was actually in his RV.
Yeah, it was mobile with my unlimited Verizon wireless connection, so I could get off the grid a bit, and so I would do the show from wherever I was, and that was a lot of fun.
Wow, that's interesting. There's a little bit of that in Snow Crash as well.
There is, yeah. Yeah, it's something I always wanted to do, and so it was after VR was here, and just like, yeah, I have the means, let's do that. It was super challenging lifestyle too, but it's pretty cool.
No, I think that's a thing that's, it's so remarkable that we're like in this room together, right? But we're all over the world. It's a very strange thing. And again, like we're in this new time, right? We're in the time of this space that we're in. So it's a whole new concept in time as well.
What is it?
Yeah.
Right? Maybe maybe we could, yeah. I've been playing a little bit of Elite Dangerous, and they have they go by like space time, the same kind of time frame that astronauts use. I was thinking maybe VR could adopt that maybe in the future, so that we can like coordinate things a little bit easier.
Yeah, it might need something.
Very practical.
Oh, because we actually, even in VRChat, have multiple people around the world working on VRChat.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
So, like, there are people here that's maybe, I don't know, but night and day.
Well, Mr. Q is in Sweden, and it's
absolutely.
probably like, what time is it, Mr. Q?
It's 6 a.m.
So the sun is coming up.
Dude, you're committed. Wait a minute.
Good morning.
6 a.m. on Saturday?
Yeah, Saturday.
Oh, that's very
you'll find him here most nights, too, this late.
Yeah, Mr. Q is amazing.
Yeah.
That's been my favorite thing, is to meet all these people from around the world, and then I go to conferences, meet them in real life. So for me, this has been an explosion of the amount of connections and conversations and social
My real life has
experiences.
actually been affected by VR, and just to give a quick anecdote, John showed me Converge, and then I had fun in Converge, and then they showed me VRChat, and then VRChat, and I now work at VRChat. Yeah. And so that's a really interesting...
You owe me something.
Yes. I do.
Ron has paid me in double espresso, cans of double espresso, chocolate, chips, tequila. What else have you paid me?
An Avatar.
I fed him. Oh, an Avatar. Yeah, we. Hack Spanner over there actually is responsible for Avatar. Hack Spanner, stand up, take a bow.
Hack Spanner's part of the.
By the way, there's probably about 5 X-Float employees watching you right now from this room.
Oh, no.
Quiet.
That is
Watching
interesting.
You. So one thing I actually thought of in VR, which I find interesting, is VR social makes people sometimes more social, but it also has the same effect. And one thing I was thinking of is having, I wonder if people should be invisible, because there's a lot of personal space kind of issues and some other interesting things. So it's been interesting watching these shows and watching even you, John. Like, there's motion sickness to get over, there's personal space things to get over. I don't know if you have any thoughts on those things, unless anyone else has a question.
Well, I think that that's one of the most interesting things about VR. I mean, like, right now we're being very civilized. You know, we're just sitting and minding our own personal space, but I think that's one of the most fascinating things, potentially, is to be, you do want to obey the same sort of, like, rules of personal space, and you can feel it right away, but also, I think that's one of the most exciting things to try out, is literally standing next to people. And honestly, to me, this whole thing unlocks the same sort of thing as Halloween, you know, for me.
Yeah, I think it's exciting that those problems are even possible.
Exactly. And I do think people become less inhibited when they are avatars. There's no doubt about it. And so it's another form of that evolution, isn't it, Gunter? Right? Like, if we feel like we can be more ourselves or more free to express, golly, what kind of impact in general does that have for a person's personality? Does that, if you do a lot of that, does it come out in the real world? Do you become more introverted in the real world? It would be weird. It's sort of like you live a double life.
That's really what I do. Like, my real name's not Gunter.
What?
But really, so many people know me, of course, as that.
I'm not really Ron either.
Yeah. Well, and it's weird. I'll tell my mom about this. She knows this is a part of my life that I go by this nickname, and I have a separate Facebook and a Twitter, and I actually use these things more than my personal one too. So this lifestyle has taken over. It is sort of strange and very interesting.
Does
I like
she tell you to come home for dinner? In
Are you inviting me over?
No, I'm saying
dinner.
most moms are like, "Hey, come home for dinner," and
Yes.
they show up in VR and they're like, "What do you come home for dinner? Dinner's getting cold."
One day you should bring your mom on the show.
I should. My wife, anybody that I know.
That'd be weird. A family Gunter show. They should all look like Tron
That would be
avatars.
I have a DK2
Gunter.
I could put two people in, actually. That's interesting. I'm betting we're running out of time. I don't mind taking a couple more questions, but we also want to be able to have time for you, John, to see some of the other VR chat rooms, worlds. It's just awesome.
John,
maybe we can have questions while we're walking through the worlds, just to
we can
save time.
absolutely do that. Everybody here will be hanging out.
So
We'll
John's
be playing around.
As some people are sort of sensitive, so I'm gonna maybe try to walk him a little bit, and so maybe make a portal very close to his.
Well, let me end the show and everything, and then we'll run the after party.
Disco lights.
So what was I gonna say? I mean, we could talk forever, John. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I hope you could come back because we have some deep conversations that we still need to have. I feel.
No problem. Let's get together again.
Cool. And Bob, thank you. Ron, thank you. And thanks to everybody that's in the audience here. Always appreciate everybody coming out and everybody that's watching the YouTube video. Thanks so much. Come hang out in VRChat. It's the coolest place. Follow me at Gunters Universe. Where can people find you, John? They want to reach out and say hello.
I'll see you out there.
You want to give them your phone number? What's your phone number? Yeah. Check out ILMxLAB. And that's it. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great rest of your week. I'm going to hit this button that's going to play music right now. Oh, shit, it's not working. There we go. Oh, yeah, there it is. Yeah. Woo! I have to stretch the leg. Yay. Mr. Q. Hey. Bring us the potty. Oh, yeah. Oh. Very good, robot.
Woo! Avatar, John. I'm feeling it.
Yeah. This is so awesome. Thank you, everybody.
This is Jordan.
Yeah.
Over
Clap,
here.
clap, clap to everybody.